Human communication. This presentation will deal with human communication and main processes at the basis of the behavior of human beings. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to know how the human communication works, recognize the human communication processes, build awareness of implicit and explicit acts of communication. Terms and keywords of this presentation are interactions, human relationships, feelings, human communication. Table of contents. Basics of communication. The communication elements. The structure of the sign. The field of communication. The linguistic acts. The process of signification. Basic function of communication. Communication among humans. Cooperative principles. Actions of communication. Conversation. Proxemics. Communication through the eyes. Communication through clothing. Multicultural communication. Misleading communication. Basics of communication. The communication elements. According to the linguistic Roman Jakobson, any act of verbal communication is composed of 6 elements that are necessary for the communication to occur: a context, the word of signs in which the message takes place, a sender, a receiver, a channel to put in contact addresser and addressee, a common code, and a message. The structure of the sign. According to Ferdinand de Saussure, founder of the modern linguistic, signifier is a perceivable data which, joined to a signified or concept, results in a sign, the fundamental part of every message. The philosopher and linguistic Charles K. Hodgkin, along with the critic, poet, and teacher Ivor Armstrong Richards, elaborated the semantic triangle. For example, the word dog is the sign or signifier. The referent is a specific dog, while the concept of dog is the signified. According to Roland Barthes, philosopher, essayist, and critic, if we consider a rectangle with green, white, and red stripes, that is a signifier, whose denotation is Italian country. Its connotation is all that we could attach to the idea of Italy. The field of communication. Syntax studies the ordering of the communication elements, codes, languages, and as these are organized and how they are combined. Semantics concern the relationship between communication and its objects. Pragmatics concern the relationship between communication, speakers, and environment in which the communication takes place. The linguistic acts. According to John Longshore Austin, philosopher of language and professor at Oxford, each communication act can be studied on the basis of 3 different levels of action. Locutionary act, the action through which the sounds, the parts of the speech, and the meanings are combined. Elocutionary act, the action executed by the speaker by means of the words. Perlocutionary act, the action resulting from the speaker's choice of using specific words. Example, I inform someone to alarm him. The process of signification. The signification is the relation between something that is present, that we perceive through at least one of the 5 senses, with something that is not present, its real meaning. This process is also a process of communication. Consider as an example a traffic light. What is present? Red light on. The real meaning: no one is allowed to go on. The process of communication: stop. The meaning is expressed through the language, which consists in a complexity of tools that activate the process of communication. Propositional function of communication. The aim of communication is the elaboration, organization, and transmission of knowledge among members of a community. The episodic knowledge is the knowledge deriving from specific past events. The semantic knowledge has instead no temporal dimension. Language is an essential part of the propositional function, as it allows to organize and communicate thoughts. Relational function of communication. The aim of communication is creating, renewing, and changing the network of relations, social interaction. The expressive function of communication allows to show emotions, desires, intentions. It is at the basis of social interactions, that is to say, observable behavioral exchanges between the participants. These social interactions create the relation, otherwise known as general relationships among people. Communication among humans. Cooperative principles. Herbert Paul Greece, British philosopher of language, formulated the implicit rules that are essential for understanding the development of a conversation. These principles describe how speakers and listeners mutually accept one another. Greece's maxims of conversation are the following. Maxim of quality. Try to make your contribution one that is true, and then do not say what you believe to be false. Do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. Maxim of quantity. Make your contribution as informative as is required. Do not make your contribution more informative than is required. Maxim of manner. Be perspicuous, and then avoid obscurity of expression, avoid ambiguity. Be brief, avoid unnecessary prolixity, be orderly. Axioms of communication. Among the most popular studies of the Palo Alto School are the axioms of communication, theorized by the psychologist and philosopher Paul Vaslavic, the psychologist Janet L. McBevan, and the psychiatrist Donald Diavolo Jackson. 1. Cannot not communicate. Every communication has a content and a relationship aspect such that the latter classifies the former and is therefore a meta-communication. The nature of a relationship is dependent on the punctuation of the partner's communication procedures. Human communication involves both digital and analog modalities. Interhuman communication procedures are either symmetric or complementary. Conversation is a very variable and flexible communicative interaction. Generally, it consists of 3 phases. The opening phase, where there is a mutual recognition, the development of one or more topics, the closing phase. A characteristic element of the conversation is the swapping of the shifts. In Western culture, there are some rules that are respected. Conservation of the turn. One of the speakers communicates that he doesn't want to be interrupted. Transfer of the turn, often through empty pauses. Request for the shift, invitations to finish the talking. Rejection of the turn, through nod in agreement. Continuous or discontinuous conversation, determined by frequency and duration of silent periods. Proxemics. Proxemics regulate the sense of distances between people. The anthropologist Edward Twitchell Hall discerns 4 different zones. Intimate distance. The presence of the other is evident and there is a great contribution from the different human senses. Examples are the distances that are established in a struggle and in comfort. Personal distance. The sense of proximity derives from the possibility of having a relationship with the other to the extremity. At this distance, one can hold back the other. Social distance. It makes it possible to work in presence of others without being unkind, but also to conduct personal affairs. Public distance. This is the distance that is established around important public celebrity, and that concerns anyone in public occasions. Communication through the eyes. The ability to understand a look as referential attention, the look as a mental action of attention and interest towards a specific object or event. Cognitive act. The possession of a knowledge related to a specific object or event. Epistemic perspective. The adoption of a certain internal and mental point of view. Communicating through clothing. Clothing communicates a status, work dress or precious dress. It is also related to the personal identity or features of a specific culture. In Western culture, for example, there is an opposition in clothing between elegance and functionality. It is difficult to set apart the body from the clothing. These two elements are interrelated, producing a complex system of meanings. Multicultural communication. The resources of a culture are at risk in communication, especially when there is no coherence in front of those who do not share it. Communication theorist Barnett Peirce defines monocultural communication as the easier and most natural form of communication. The other is considered as a native who uses the same resources. The theoretical resources of a monocultural society are not put at risk, and this is a negative factor as it prevents change. The ethnocentric communication is the most common form of communication. In it, there is a distinction between us with our practices and stories and them with their practices and stories. In modernist communication, understanding depends on mutual improvisation in which interactions are expected to be renegotiated at any time. The speaker must be good at responding appropriately to the approaches of others. Misleading communication. The reason for using misleading communication may concern the acquisition or protection of resources, the management of the relationship with the partner, maintaining the level of self-esteem. There are three types of misleading communication. Functional lying. In a regular context, a person produces a signal that assumes a certain predictable value, so as to provoke a response. Given this condition, he or she can carry out two behaviors: active falsification, producing the same signal in a different context, so as to induce partners to the usual response; concealment of information, producing a different signal in the usual context. Intentional lying. The person that produces a certain signal within a context knows what the effect would be. With this premise, the person can always deceive through the two forms: active falsification, producing the same signal in a different context, sure that the similar ones will reply with expected effect. Information concealment does not emit signal in the standard context. Tactical lie. The ability of producing a common action with the aim to encourage the others to incorrectly interpret the meaning, with an advantage of the first person. This presentation was about the main general processes at the basis of the behavior of human beings. Now that you have finished watching it, you should be able to know how the human communication works, recognize the human communication processes, build awareness of implicit and explicit acts of communication.